Hey everyone, it's Lexie, and today's video will be sharing with you all the books that I ended up reading in the month of June and the books that I plan on reading in July. So despite being slightly busy in June, we were in Canada for a little bit and all that stuff. So despite the traveling of kind of being back home in Canada, I managed to read a total of 5 books, which I'm very proud about actually, because last month in May I only read 2 books. So I feel like I've finally kind of gotten back into a groove with reading. I feel like there was just a lot of stuff happening towards the end of the year, or I guess like the kind of the last couple months with like moving and kind of other things kind of going on. So it's been fairly busy. So I'm happy that I've kind of gotten back into a groove, and I've also kind of enjoyed reading a little bit more. So yeah, I was kind of pleasantly impressed with myself with getting all this done. So like I said, I kind of read 5 books that are kind of all over in terms of genres, so I'm excited to talk about these. In addition to, in July, we are getting a puppy, which I'm really excited about, and I have kind of 5-ish books on my TBR for July, which I think is wishful thinking. I don't know if I'll get to all these, especially with kind of having a puppy and all that stuff, which is going to be exciting. You'll get, I think in August, that's when I'll kind of have my vlog from July, so you can go check that out when that is out. But it's very exciting. I'll obviously post about it on my Instagram if you want to go and check it out, and she will have her own Instagram too, so you can go and follow her. But yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So starting out, this was like an amazing book. I was not expecting to really be blown away by this, and I know one of you mentioned in my comments like a couple days ago that you have picked this one up too and you really enjoyed it. So I'm really excited because, like I said, I feel like this is one that I have not really heard a lot about, and it is Codename Helene by Ariel Lawhon. I don't know how to say the last name, but basically this is based off of a true story where we follow Nancy Wake, who was this Australian woman who was a real life woman who ends up kind of becoming a kind of spy during World War II, essentially, where she gets tasked with kind of being flown into Nazi occupied France, and she is kind of tasked with kind of helping the French resistance get access to kind of ammunition, like all these things. So she was kind of in charge of getting that, and she was kind of known as, what is it, the White Mouse or something. But this was really great. Like I said, I was not expecting to like this as much as I did, and it kind of really blew me away. Nancy was just a strong, really well-developed character. Well, even though she is like was a real person, like she just felt so real. She jumped off the page. She had such a strong personality, and it really came through. I loved seeing her kind of deal with this situation and kind of take charge, really, in these situations where it was kind of like a man's job to be doing these things, and how she kind of had to stand her ground and do all these things. And it was really fun and interesting to see that kind of take place, and it was really super suspenseful too. Like there was times where I was really anxious and just having some of the scenarios that they were put into, and this kind of bounces back in kind of a past and present day storyline. The present day is Nancy when she is kind of working with the French resistance through kind of the English spy organization, and then the past present day, or the past storyline, is her falling in love with her husband and what eventually kind of led her down this path of kind of working for the resistance. And this was really truly is inspiring read. And if you read the author note too, there she kind of talks about how she got a lot of, like, some of the things that happened are like from her actual autobiography of this actual woman, and the biographies and everything that has been kind of written about her. It includes like some diary entries too, and so she tried to make this as realistic as possible and kind of true to the actual like story of what happened, which I really enjoyed. And so, like I said, I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I did feel like kind of once the climax, like kind of when the story kind of ended, I kind of dragged on a little bit, but I still really enjoyed this. Like I said, I haven't read a historical fiction where I've been like really obsessed with in a while, so I'm happy this kind of kick-started my love for the historical fiction. So like I said, I have not heard a lot of people talk about this, but this was really, I think this was on par for me for some of my favorite historical fiction, like World War II specifically, like The Nightingale or the Alice Network by Quinn. Like I think this kind of is on that level and that quality to me, and just how I think the author made such a big effort to make this as true as possible. She does talk about what things she kind of, you know, changed, or just for the sake of the story, or kind of altered to just kind of fit the storyline for better pacing. But for the most part, you can tell that she tried to be really true to the story, and I really like this. Like I said, this is such an incredible woman, so it's crazy to think that like she's kind of forgotten by history. Like I never really learned about her, so yeah, like I said, really great. Highly, highly, highly recommend. And yeah, it was just fantastic. So next up, because I really loved this author, I picked up her most recent book, which was The Frozen River. And this takes place in the 1770s, I want to say, where we follow this woman, I'm blanking on her name, who was this kind of, like, I guess you can say she was kind of like the medic or kind of the healer of her small town during kind of the early days of America in remote Maine. And this is where kind of the codename Helene is based on the woman's life. This is inspired by, and one of the things she mentions is, one of the things that is kept in here is this actual real life woman would keep diary entries of, you know, babies she delivered, like kind of very briefly. And the only thing that is very like left of this woman as of this point in time was this diary that was kind of passed down through generations, and I think is on display in a museum somewhere. So it was very interesting, like all that is left of this woman today is that journal, and that her diary entry is what inspired this book. So basically she is kind of the midwife, like, you know, somewhat like unofficial doctor of this small town in Maine, and this woman ends up getting gang raped by two prominent men in this area. So the story starts out where one of the men that was accused is found murdered in, like under the frozen river, and it kind of avalanches through there. This book, like I said, was really, really interesting. I don't think it was as great as Codename Helene, but I still really enjoyed it. I just really kind of felt that sense of unease that, you know, people are like, you just know something bad's gonna happen, or you just kind of feel unease, you don't trust a lot of people. And it was really inspiring to me to have like this woman especially during this time period, really try to stand up for her friend who was raped, and like at this point in time how that was kind of handled within society, I think was really interesting to see. And I've never really read anything from like early American like time period. I think this is like maybe like 1779, so it's kind of just after America, the country, has been formed, which I thought was really interesting. It does deal with really like sensitive subject matter, so I think if you are you know, if it's a little bit triggering to read about sexual assault and like those type of things, I would stay away from it. But I thought this book was really important. It does address a lot of important topics in terms of women's rights and how it's important to advocate for yourself in these situations. And it was just, you couldn't help but root for the main character and what she was kind of inspiring to do. And so, like I said, even though Codename Helene was very based on, this was very inspired by this woman who all that is kind of left of her, and all that's really known about her is this journal. And so she kind of she knew like from the diary entries of this actual woman that there was this rape case around this time, that she, like this actual person in history, had to kind of get that medical expertise, and like this was kind of going on within the town. And there are like some minor court records and court documents that are still like here today, but she created kind of this not fantastical, but fictionalized story around that. So I thought that was really interesting. I think this is definitely an author that I'm going to be keeping on my radar. I do want to get a physical copy of this book, but yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed it and highly recommend. And I don't know if I mentioned, but I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, because I kind of read 2 books back to back that were very kind of had somewhat hard like subject matter, I felt like I needed a little break. And in between waiting for the second half of the Bridgerton season 3 to come out, I picked up the first book from the library, which was The Duke and I. And I was not the biggest fan of the season 1 storyline. Part of it too was that I just didn't like the actress who plays Daphne, and I still don't really like that actress. But I think also the storyline was not the best, and like I still enjoyed this book. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, 3.5 out of 5 stars. Like, it was enjoyable. I feel like the TV show kind of followed the main plot progressions and all that stuff, which I really enjoyed. but it was just kind of a fun light read. I finished it like actually pretty quickly. But yeah, like it's nothing special. I think I prefer the TV show to the books, at least. I've only read the first book right now, but I feel like the TV show flushes out some of the other side characters, and I think for me, the ensemble of the characters in the TV series are what I really enjoy the most. But yeah, this was fine. Like it wasn't anything like groundbreaking, but it was just kind of a fun, lighter read compared to some of the heavier matter. Next up, I picked up The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, and this is her newest historical fiction, fantasy, romance, and this one I would say it was quite a disappointment. So it follows this woman who has kind of grown up during the Spanish Inquisition, and she was kind of raised with kind of like multiple religions where she's Jewish, but at the time she's trying to kind of hide that part of her just given this time period. And so she has what she calls like the ability to perform little miracles where she can kind of cast this spell and she can do like small things of magic. And one day when the cook burns a loaf of bread for like the family that she works for, she uses her magic to like basically make the bread not burnt, and the lady of the house observes that, and then she starts to exploit that. And then there's kind of like a subtle romance plot in here, and I don't want to give too much away. I think it's kind of best to kind of just simply kind of know that. But yeah, I felt like this was half-baked for me. I feel like one of the things that I really love about Leigh Bardugo is her characters and her characterization and seeing that character development. And then I felt like these characters were very flat and they just weren't a lot of fun to read about in this case. And I will say like the plot was like incredibly boring. Like nothing really happens. Like there's like somewhat of like a competition, but like that's not until the halfway point, and then it was just like the pacing was weird. It was incredibly slow. I didn't really believe the romance in this one, and it was just, I was left wanting more in this case. Like it was kind of like I could feel myself getting a little bit slumpy reading this. Like I'll look at my like notes here and what I wrote in my journal, but I said like I like the historical setting, didn't believe the romance, boring, pacing issues. I did actually really enjoy the ending, and I felt like something was missing. Like I said, like this felt half-baked. This felt like a draft. I felt like there is much greater room for expansion and greater development of these characters, and something that could have been done to the pacing. Like this book is like just under 400 pages, and I felt like it could have been shaved down. Like I feel like there was just a lot of not a lot happening, and it was a little bit hard to read with. I did really enjoy like the last like chapter or so. I felt like that was like a good bittersweet conclusion. Like I did like that like last like 20-page chunk at the end, but it was just a whole lot of nothing for like a, you know, a good ending. But it wasn't really worth it in my eyes, and I feel like that's kind of been the general like reviews and like the synopsis of what I've been kind of seeing online with a lot of people, was that it was just like it just felt underdeveloped. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. Like I said, there was aspects that I didn't like, aspects that I did, so I think it just kind of depends. I just was left wanting more, and especially knowing what she can do with some of her other books, this one just didn't hit the mark with me. My fiance felt the same thing too. Like he felt it was very, very, you know, dry and boring, and like the ending was satisfying, but it was just not fun to get to that point. So yeah, a little bit disappointed by this one. Like it was fine. I think if you were a fan of Leigh Bardugo, it might be worth just to read, but for the most part I think you can kind of skip this one. And lastly, this is a book that I also picked up from the library. I feel like I've kind of gone back to using the library again, and it was The Serpent in the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. And this one was like a fantasy that I've heard like a lot of people talk about, and I've kind of gotten better at not purchasing books from a series that I'm not sure I will like, right? Because at this point in time, I've just been buying books from authors that I've liked or series that I've liked, and then kind of continuing on where I know I'm probably going to read those books and enjoy them. So when I get a book from a library, it's one where it's like, I'm not sure, but I don't, like, there's no money at stake. I can just return the library book, and I'm not left with a book that I don't want. But basically this follows a human who is raised in this fantastical world where she is adopted by this vampire king, and she goes to basically kind of, she enters herself into this tournament where it is a fight to the death, and if you're the last one standing, you are granted a wish by a goddess, and it kind of goes off from there. And this is, I guess, romantasy. I guess it's been kind of classified as. I didn't really think it was like so romantasy, but it was fine. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think it was, you know, it was like a solid beginning to a fantasy series. It wasn't anything mind-blowing. It wasn't anything new or creative. Like, it was just, you know, fine. I did enjoy it, but it wasn't, you know, the most well-written book. It wasn't like, there were some annoying things, but for the most part, I did enjoy this. I really loved the premise of this human who kind of like despises vampires and hates them, who still wants to be a part of this world. So I thought that was a very interesting kind of development in character, kind of devices that you kind of see in play, and you get like just enough world building for you to be like interested, but you still don't get the whole world fleshed out. And there is kind of a romance in here that I did find, like the main romance in here I did find like slightly annoying, and the love interest will say like certain things that I just made me roll my eyes. Like, he has certain lines where he just calls her like princess, and then like he says like his like tagline that he always says to her is like, oh, there she is. And like, that was just kind of annoying because it was just done so much that it was a little bit annoying. And the kind of romance aspect, again, it's kind of like enemies to lovers in a sense, where it was like, but it was to the point where it was like, it was annoying with the main character being like, oh my god, I hate this guy too, oh my god, he's so hot. So it was kind of a little bit weird, and that was part, it was really annoying. But I did really love kind of the last 100 pages. Some of the plot twists were a little bit like you could guess, but there's one I think that was pretty well done. So like I said, this one was like good. I could see why a lot of people, I think if you're starting out in like the fantasy romantasy, would really enjoy this. And I think also if you're a fan of ACOTAR, I think there's a lot of tropes in this that are very similar to ACOTAR. So like I said, I enjoyed it. It wasn't groundbreaking. It wasn't like it's not going to be my favorite fantasy series of all time, but I still really had a great time. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Like, it was, like I said, a solid fantasy read. So yeah, I definitely will be continuing on. Alrighty, so let's move on to the books that I want to read in July. The first one is one that I got from the library actually yesterday, and it is the sequel to The Serpent and the Wings of Night, which is The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. I'm like slightly worried because I've heard people say this book is not as good as the first, but I think the way the series is set up is that the first 2 books in this series, there's gonna be 6 books total. The first 2 books in the series follows like this main couple, and then there's one that follow like the next one. It's like basically composed of 3 duologies following different characters, and like each duology is each like character and like couple basically. But yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but like I said, I'm a little bit nervous because I've seen just kind of in some YouTube videos recently that this one wasn't as good or people didn't like it as much, but I'm still gonna go in with an open mind. Maybe I will enjoy it. I don't know. I think I will continue on with this series regardless, because I think the next book that comes out at the end of this year follows another character, because I saw that in there, but follows one of the characters that I do find interesting. So I think I will continue on, but I'm kind of a little bit nervous, but I'm just gonna go in with an open mind. And like I said, because this is a library book, I'm not stuck with a book that I don't like. Like I said, the first book I really like, it was a solid book, so I'm a little bit nervous, but we'll see how it goes. Next up, I have kind of just continuing on with my Bridgerton reads. If I need like a little break, I have the Viscount Who Loved Me, I think is the second one that follows Anthony, how they say it. But yeah, this kind of just follows, I don't want to give too much of a synopsis, but yeah, this just follows Anthony, and I do have the ebook from the library, so that will be, if I need a little bit of break from my fantasy reads, I will kind of pick this up, and I do read through them fairly quickly, so it's a good palate cleanser and amongst some of the more difficult books to read. Next, this is a new release that comes out July 9th, and I have my like iPad here because I don't know the synopsis, but it's by Quinn. She is, like I said, one of my favorite authors. She did The Alice Network, which I mentioned is one of my favorite World War II books, and this one says it's kind of classified under historical fiction and mystery, so I'm very intrigued. But it says Washington, D.C., 1950. Everyone keeps to themselves in Briarwood House, a down-at-the-heels, all-female boarding house in the heart of the nation's capital, where secrets pine behind white picket fences. But when the lovely, mysterious widow Grace moves into the attic, she draws her oddball collection of neighbors into unlikely friendship. Poised English beauty Fliss, whose facade of perfect wife and mother covers gaping inner wounds. Police officer's daughter Nora, who is entangled with a shadowy gangster. Frustrated baseball star B, whose career has ended along with the Women's Baseball League of World War II. And poisonous gung-ho Arlene, who has thrown herself into McCarthy's Red Scare. Grace's weekly attic room dinner parties and window brewed sun tea become a healing balm for all their lives, and she hides a terrible secret of her own. When a shocking act of violence tears apart the house, the Briar Club women must decide once for all who is the true enemy in their midst. So again, this seems interesting, seems like it will be fun, and yeah, definitely excited. There hasn't been like a new release that has come out like recently, so based on like kind of the ones, my anticipated releases, so this will be the first one in a while, so I'm excited to pick up her next read. I will quickly mention these because these have been on my TBR for the past like couple months, and it's the next two books in the Dragonheart Legacy by Nora Roberts, which are books 2 and 3. It follows this woman who finds out that she is a descendant from like a very prestigious like royalty fae line, and it kind of goes off from there. I will have to reread my notes for these two for the first book because it was a couple years since I read them, but I definitely want to marathon these definitely this summer so I can kind of check them off of my list. And lastly, again, like I said, I don't know if I'm going to get to all of these just because we will be busy with the little baby, but this is one that I've been wanting to read for a while, and it is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. He is the author of the Beartown trilogy, which is just incredibly well written and heartbreaking, and these books are actually translated from a different language, so like from Swedish, so the fact that they're able to kind of show the lyricism of his writing with these translations, like they're really well done. So I'm excited to dive into this one again. This is one that I've had on my shelf for a while, but it says, looking at real estate isn't usually a life or death situation, but an apartment open house becomes just that when a failed bank robber bursts in and takes a group of 8 strangers hostage. Each of them carries a lifetime of grievances, hurts, secrets, and passions that are ready to boil over. None of them is entirely who they appear to be. In short, they are the worst group of hostages in the world. But as the minutes tick by, they begin to suspect that the criminal mastermind holding them hostage might be in need of more rescuing than they are. As the authorities and the media surround the premises, these reluctant allies will reveal surprising truths about themselves and set in motion a chain of events so unexpected that even they can hardly explain what happens next. So again, I'm hoping this is going to be like pulling the heartstrings with most Fredrik Backman books. So yeah, I'm excited to eventually pick this one up. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of the books that you plan on reading this month and what books you read in June as well. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.